The first thing that registered was the ache, a dull throb in my skull, a tightness in my chest. My fingertips brushed against silk sheets, their cool smoothness unfamiliar. The air carried a hint of lavender, mingling with the fading smokiness of a dying candle. My breath hitched. No. This isn't right. I forced my eyes open, my pulse pounding in my ears. Above me, a chandelier glowed softly, its golden edges glinting in the dim candlelight. The walls, the drapes. I knew this place. This was my bedroom in the Everstone estate. But that was impossible. Because I had died. Hadn't I? My fingers curled into the sheets as memories surged through me like a crashing wave. Evelyne's sweet, deceitful smile, the hushed whispers of court, the cold sting of betrayal. My fiancé no, my former fiancé Cedric Edwin standing beside my sister, the engagement ring that should have been mine glistening on her finger. The scandal. The mockery. The ruin. And then, the darkness. But here I was, breathing, alive. And not just alive back. I turned my head, my gaze landing on the stack of letters atop my vanity. My heart pounded. I know these letters. They were from the time before the engagement had been announced. Before I had been cast aside. I had returned to the past. A slow chill crept down my spine, followed by something far more dangerous. Satisfaction. In my past life, I had been blind, too trusting, too naive. I had believed Evelyne's smiles, Cedric's empty promises, my mother's indifference. I had let them take everything from me. But not this time. This time, I wouldn't wait for my sister to strike first. This time, I would be the one holding the dagger. I sat frozen in my bed, my mind racing. The soft glow of the chandelier above cast long shadows along the walls, the golden trim gleaming like a distant memory I had long since buried. But this was not a memory. This was real. I was here alive, breathing, reborn. Slowly, I pulled the silk sheets away and swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My heart pounded, not from fear but from the thrill of knowing what was to come. Evelyne Everstone had no idea what awaited her. I had been foolish once blindly believing in sisterhood, in love, in the illusion of security within my own family. But now, I know better. And if fate had given me another chance, I would not be the same helpless girl who had watched her life crumble beneath her feet. I pushed myself off the bed, my movements steady, controlled. My bare feet touched the cool marble floor, grounding me in the reality of this new beginning. I turned toward my vanity, my reflection staring back at me, a face both familiar and foreign. I looked younger. My skin still had the softness of youth, untouched by the stress of betrayal and ruin. My eyes, once dulled by pain in my past life, now gleamed with a dangerous clarity. This time, I would not be the prey. A soft knock at my door broke my thoughts. I turned sharply, my senses on high alert. "Come in," I called, my voice steady. The door creaked open, and a maid entered, bowing her head. "Good morning, my lady. Your mother requests your presence in the drawing room." Mother. She had always favored Evelyne over me. My younger sister had been the shining jewel of the family, adored and praised, while I was expected to be dutiful, obedient, and quietly fade into the background. I had once longed for my mother's approval, but I knew better now. I straightened my posture, letting my lips curve into a polite, unreadable smile. "Tell her I'll be there shortly." The maid nodded and left, leaving me alone once more. I turned back to my reflection, my fingers tightening around the vanity's edge. This is it. The game has begun. And I intended to win. As I walked through the grand halls of Everstone Manor, memories of my past life pressed against my mind like ghosts whispering warnings. I remembered this morning. The very same morning when my mother had called me to discuss an upcoming gathering that would change everything. The day my sister set her plan in motion. I stepped into the drawing room, my gaze immediately locking onto my mother's poised figure. She sat elegantly by the window, a cup of tea in her hands. Across from her, lounging with an air of effortless grace, was Evelyne. My dear, Deceitful sister. Serafina, darling, you took your time, Mother said without looking up. I approached, my steps measured. I wasn't aware urgency was required, Mother. Evelyne giggled, a sound so delicate and sweet it could fool anyone but me. Sister, you mustn't keep Mother waiting. It's quite rude, you know. I fought the urge to scoff. The same sister who had stolen my fiancé, humiliated me, and left me to ruin now pretended to lecture me on propriety. I took my seat, keeping my expression neutral. You wished to see me, Mother. Mother set down her tea and finally looked at me. There is an important gathering at the Edwin estate in 3 days. Cedric's family has extended an invitation. Cedric, Edwin. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to remain calm. My once beloved fiancé, the man I had adored, trusted, had been nothing more than a viper waiting to strike. And in my past life, I had walked willingly into his trap. Evelyne clasped her hands together with feigned excitement. Isn't it wonderful, Sarah? You and Lord Cedric have always had such a strong connection. This is the perfect opportunity to grow even closer. I knew the truth behind her words. This gathering had been the beginning of my downfall. In my past life, I had attended the event, blissfully unaware that Evelyne had already begun her schemes. She had whispered lies to Cedric, manipulated the court, and made sure that I was slowly but surely pushed aside. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. But not this time. I lifted my teacup, my movements graceful, controlled. Yes, it is quite the opportunity, I said, meeting Evelyne's gaze with a smile of my own. I'm very much looking forward to it. Her expression faltered for the briefest moment, so brief that no one else would have noticed. But I did. She wasn't expecting that. Good. Let her wonder. Let her squirm. The game had just begun, and I intended to play it better than she ever could. That night, I stood by my bedroom window, staring at the darkened landscape beyond. The Edwin gathering loomed ahead, a reminder of the moment I had lost everything before. But this time, I would not be the victim. I would not be the pawn in Evelyne's twisted game. No, I would be the one to orchestrate her downfall. And when she realized what I had done, she finally understood that she had lost before she even began. It would be far too late for her to undo it. I turned from the window, my heart steady. Let the deception begin. The Edwin estate loomed ahead, its towering spires casting long shadows beneath the golden glow of twilight. The grand hall, where nobles would soon gather, was already alight with candle chandeliers and the hum of polite conversation. I stepped down from the carriage with practiced elegance, my silk gown flowing around me in waves of deep crimson, a deliberate choice. Red was the color of power, of danger, of a woman who was not to be ignored. And tonight, I refused to be ignored. Beside me, Evelyne emerged, dressed in the softest shades of blue, a vision of innocence and grace. A facade. A disguise she wore so well that even I had once fallen for it. Are you nervous, dear sister? She asked, her voice sickly sweet. I met her gaze and smiled. Not at all. Are you? Her fingers twitched against the folds of her gown. A small reaction, but one I caught nonetheless. Without another word, I turned toward the entrance, where Cedric Edwin stood waiting. Cedric. The man I had once loved. The man who had once whispered promises into my ear. Promises that had turned to ash the moment he betrayed me. I had not seen him since my return to the past, but I remembered every detail of the man before me. The sharp lines of his face, the golden locks that fell just slightly over his forehead, the cool, calculating gleam in his steel-gray eyes. He had always been charming, always knew just the right words to say. And in my past life, I had been utterly blind to the truth. But not anymore. Lady Serafina, Cedric greeted, his lips curving into a smile as he took my hand. His grip was firm, practiced. It is a pleasure to see you again. I tilted my head, studying him, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough for him to notice. I wanted him to wonder what had changed, Why the girl he had once deceived was now looking at him as though she saw straight through him. Finally, I returned his smile. The pleasure is mine, Lord Cedric. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps even wariness. Good. I wanted him to wonder. I wanted him to be uncertain. Because for the first time, I held the advantage. The grand hall was alive with nobility, laughter, and the quiet hum of whispered conversations. I moved through the crowd with ease, accepting polite greetings, exchanging smiles, but never lingering too long. Tonight was not a night for idle chatter. Tonight, I was here for one purpose: to see Cedric for what he truly was. I felt his presence before he spoke. You seem different tonight, Seraphina. I turned, meeting his gaze. Cedric stood close, his expression unreadable, but I knew him better now. He was watching me, analyzing me. I let out a soft laugh, tilting my head slightly. Oh. And how is that, my lord? His lips quirked at the corners. You carry yourself with a newfound confidence. It's intriguing. How ironic. In my past life, I had spent so much time trying to impress him, to make him see me as someone worth cherishing. And yet now, when I had abandoned all desire for his affection, he finally noticed. I stepped closer, just enough to let my voice drop to a near whisper. Perhaps you never truly saw me before. For a split second, Cedric faltered. It was a small, almost imperceptible moment, but I caught it. I smiled. Shall we dance, my lord? He blinked, then, as expected, offered his hand. Of course. I allowed him to lead me onto the ballroom floor, our movements graceful, elegant. A dance between two players, one unaware that he had already lost. As we moved, I observed him, and listened carefully to the words he chose. He spoke of politics, of his family's expectations, of the responsibilities he bore. But never once did he mention love. Not that I expected him to. Cedric Edwin had never loved me. He had only ever sought what was useful to him. But tonight, I would make sure that he realized something crucial. I was no longer someone to be used. And Evelyne? She was no longer the only one capable of deception. The music swelled around us, the ballroom glittering with candlelight and the soft laughter of noble guests. Cedric's grip was firm as we moved across the floor, his eyes locked onto mine, searching, calculating. But I had long since learned that those who sought control hated uncertainty. And tonight, I was the unpredictable one. You've changed, Cedric murmured as he guided me through a turn. There's something different about you. I let my lips curve into a mysterious smile. Should I take that as a compliment, my lord? His fingers tensed slightly against my waist before relaxing. It's simply an observation. How amusing. In my past life, I had been so desperate for his approval, for even the slightest sign that he cherished me. But now, his curiosity meant nothing to me. I had come to see him for what he truly was, a man who measured his affections by their usefulness. And tonight, I would give him no ground to stand on. As the dance ended, Cedric released my hand with reluctance. Shall we take a walk in the gardens? I tilted my head, pretending to consider. I'd love to. Let's see what you're planning, Lord Cedric. The Edwin Estates gardens were vast and meticulously kept, filled with the soft glow of lanterns and the scent of blooming roses. Cedric walked beside me in silence for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke. Evelyne mentioned that you've been distant lately. Ah. So he was already speaking to her in private. I let out a soft chuckle. Did she now? How thoughtful of her to worry about me. She cares about you, Cedric said smoothly. As do I. How easily the lies slipped from his tongue. I turned to face him, allowing the cool night breeze to sweep past us. Is that so? Then tell me, Cedric, why is it that you spend so much time speaking with my sister behind closed doors? His expression remained calm, but I saw the flicker of surprise. He hadn't expected me to confront him. You misunderstand, he said, his voice measured. Evelyne and I are merely plotting together. I finished for him, my tone light, amused. Please, Cedric, don't insult my intelligence. He exhaled, his mask slipping for just a fraction of a second. Serafina, A voice interrupted us. Serafina? Cedric. Evelyne. I turned, watching as my darling sister stepped into the lantern's glow, her expression one of perfectly feigned innocence. What's going on? She asked, eyes darting between us. I smiled. Cedric was just about to tell me the nature of your secret conversations. Evelyne stiffened, her lips parting in shock before she recovered. Oh, sister, you misunderstand. Cedric and I were only discussing ways to help you. Help me. In my past life, I had been naive enough to believe those words. But not this time. Is that so? I mused, stepping closer. How kind of you. Then perhaps you'd like to explain why I overheard you whispering in the halls last week about a certain arrangement. Evelyne paled. Cedric's jaw tightened. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I had given them a chance to lie, and they had taken it. But now, the truth would come crashing down on them both. Taking a deliberate step forward, I looked directly into Cedric's eyes. Tell me, my lord. If you truly cared for me, why did you hesitate just now? Why did you not immediately deny my words? He said nothing. Because he couldn't. And in that moment, I knew I had won. Evelyne clenched her fists, struggling to mask her frustration. Sarah, you're being ridiculous. There's nothing going on between us. I let out a soft, almost pitying laugh. Oh, Evelyne, I murmured. You're truly terrible at lying to me. Her mask cracked. For the first time, I saw genuine panic in her eyes. I turned back to Cedric, my tone turning sharp. You have two choices, Cedric. Either admit the truth now in private, or I'll ensure that every noble in that ballroom knows exactly what's been happening behind my back. Evelyne sucked in a sharp breath. Sarah, you wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I challenged, arching a brow. She faltered. Because deep down, she already knew the answer. I was no longer the obedient, trusting sister she could manipulate. I was no longer her victim. And by the time this night was over, she and Cedric would finally realize it. The weight of my words lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Evelyne's mask of innocence had cracked, revealing the first true flickers of panic beneath. Cedric, ever the strategist, remained silent, his mind likely racing for a way to salvage this moment. But there was no escape. I had cornered them both. The garden, once a place of whispered secrets and hidden meetings, now bore witness to the unraveling of their carefully woven lies. You're wrong, Evelyne finally whispered, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her. You're twisting things, Sarah. I was only trying to help you. By arranging private meetings with my fiancé? I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. How noble of you, sister. Cedric exhaled sharply, finally speaking. Serafina, let's not make a scene. A scene. I laughed soft, cold, merciless. Is that what concerns you, Cedric? I stepped closer, my gaze locking onto his. That your deception might be exposed? His jaw clenched. You don't understand. No, I interrupted, my voice like steel. For once, I understand perfectly. I turned to Evelyne, watching as her carefully constructed persona crumbled under my scrutiny. Tell me, sister, was it before or after our engagement was announced that you decided I was unworthy of him? Evelyne's lips parted, but no words came out. She had no excuse. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some innocent mistake. This was betrayal. And I would never forgive her for it. The tension between us was suffocating, and I knew they were scrambling for a way to regain control of the situation. But I had come prepared. You want to keep up this charade? I said, my voice dangerously soft. Then allow me to end it for you. I reached into the folds of my gown, pulling out a small, folded piece of parchment, one that I had prepared in advance. Cedric's eyes flickered with suspicion as I handed it to him. What is this? Your engagement contract, I said simply. His fingers tightened around the paper, but before he could speak, I continued. It outlines everything: my family's dowry, our alliance, our impending union. I took a step closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. Tell me, Cedric, was Evelyne truly worth losing all of it? The color drained from Evelyne's face. Cedric's grip on the contract faltered. He understood now. He was trapped. If he chose Evelyne, he would lose everything my family had offered. The Everstone name was far more powerful than the Edwins could ever hope to be, and breaking our engagement would be a political disaster. But if he stayed with me, he would have to endure the cold, unyielding woman I had become. I smiled, tilting my head. You may take the night to decide. But if I don't have an answer by tomorrow, I'll assume you've chosen dishonor. Cedric said nothing. Evelyne looked as though she might faint. Good. They deserved far worse. The next morning, a knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Cedric stood there, dressed impeccably as always, his expression composed. Serafina. Cedric, I greeted, stepping aside. I assume you've made your decision? His lips pressed into a thin line. I have. I gestured for him to continue. A long silence stretched between us before he finally spoke. The engagement remains intact. Victory. But I wasn't finished. And Evelyne? I asked, watching him closely. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, but he quickly masked it. She will stay away from me. Lies. He might have chosen duty over Evelyne, but that didn't mean he had abandoned her entirely. I would not make the mistake of underestimating them again. Very well, I said smoothly, walking past him. Then let us continue as we were, my lord. Because if Cedric thought I would simply forgive and forget, he was sorely mistaken. The engagement may remain intact. But the war between us had only just begun. Cedric had made his choice. He had chosen duty over Evelyne. But that didn't mean he had abandoned her entirely. I knew better than to trust a man like him. A man who had spent years pretending to love me, only to whisper sweet nothings into my sister's ear behind my back. No, Cedric Edwin was not loyal, he was calculating. And so, as I walked through the grand halls of the Everstone estate that morning, I kept my expression serene, unbothered, untouchable. Because if Cedric thought I would simply play the role of the docile fiancé, he was gravely mistaken. That evening, during a private dinner with my parents. Are you certain you wish to go through with this, Serafina? My father asked, studying me over the rim of his wine glass. The Duke of Everstone was not a man who acted without reason. And though I had told my family nothing of my previous life, my father sensed that something had shifted within me. I am certain, I said, offering a composed smile. Cedric understands his place. Mother, ever perceptive, set down her fork. And Evelyne? I met her gaze directly. She will not interfere any longer. A flicker of approval crossed her features before she picked up her glass. Good. That's my girl, Father murmured, nodding. They had no idea that I wasn't just fighting for my engagement. I was preparing for war. But even I did not expect what happened next. Later that night. The Everstone estate was always quiet at this hour, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows along the corridors. I should have been asleep. But something felt wrong. A cold prickle ran down my spine as I stepped onto the balcony outside my chambers. The gardens stretched before me, still and silent. Too silent. Then, a flicker of movement. My breath caught. Someone was down there. Watching. Waiting. I remained perfectly still, my heart hammering in my chest. The shadows shifted once more, and for the briefest moment, I saw him. A man cloaked in black. And in his hand a blade. I was being watched. No. I was being hunted. The realization struck me like ice-cold water. This wasn't some common thief or a wandering servant. This was an assassin. But who would send one after me? Evelyne? No. She was desperate, but she wasn't reckless. Cedric? Unlikely. Killing me would ruin him politically. Which meant someone else wanted me dead. And I had no idea who. The next morning. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. By dawn, I had made a decision. I needed answers. And there was only one person in the kingdom who could provide them. Killian Thorne. A name whispered in fear throughout noble society. A man known for uncovering secrets that should remain buried. And the only person who might be able to tell me who wanted me dead. Because if someone thought they could silence me before I unraveled their schemes, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Morning came, but I felt no warmth from the rising sun. The knowledge that an assassin had lurked in the shadows of my home the night before left a cold weight in my chest. I was no fool. Whoever had sent them would try again. And this time, they wouldn't fail. That was why I found myself slipping away from the Everstone estate at dawn, wrapped in a dark cloak, my identity hidden beneath its folds. I needed answers. And there was only one man in this city who could give them to me. The streets were still damp with morning mist as I arrived at a secluded building nestled between the forgotten alleys of the noble district. Killian Thorne's Den of Secrets. Killian was a man whose name carried weight in the underworld. Nobles feared him. The king's men tolerated him. And the desperate like me sought him out when they had nowhere else to turn. I knocked twice on the wooden door. Silence. Then a voice from the shadows. You've come a long way for something, Lady Everstone. I didn't flinch. I need information. The door creaked open. Then come in. But know this, my lady, truth comes at a price. Inside, the air smelled of old parchment, ink, and something sharper like steel hidden beneath velvet. Killian himself lounged behind a desk, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light. I had heard whispers about him. That he was an exiled noble. A bastard prince. A ghost from the royal court who knew too much. I didn't care about his past. I cared about what he could do for me now. I placed a pouch of gold on the desk. Someone sent an assassin after me. Killian's lips twitched into a smirk. How unfortunate. I met his gaze without hesitation. I need to know who. He leaned back, studying me. And if I find out, then I will destroy them. For the first time, his expression changed. Amusement faded into something like interest. You're not the helpless noblewoman they think you are you? No, I said coldly. And I never will be again. Meanwhile, back at the Everstone estate, Evelyne paced inside her chambers, her nails digging into her palms. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Cedric was still engaged to Serafina. Their father had sided with her. And now Serafina had power. She clenched her fists. No, she couldn't let this happen. She had spent years waiting for her moment. She had endured being the forgotten sister, the one cast in Serafina's shadow. And now that she was so close to taking everything, she was losing. Evelyne's mind raced. If Cedric wouldn't break the engagement, then she would have to force it to happen. She would have to make Serafina fall. And she knew exactly where to strike. Back in the underworld. Killian poured himself a drink, watching me over the rim of his glass. I'll look into your assassin problem. But I have a question for you, Lady Everstone. I arched a brow. And what is that? His smirk returned. Are you prepared for what you'll find? I held his gaze. I don't have the luxury of fear, Killian. He chuckled. A dangerous answer. I like it. I stood ready to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. Oh, and one last thing, he murmured, swirling his drink. Rumor has it your dear sister has been asking for a favor from the noble court. My blood turned to ice. What favor? Killian's grin was sharp as a knife. A way to ruin you. Killian's words echoed in my mind. Rumor has it your dear sister has been asking for a favor from the noble court. A way to ruin you. Evelyne had never been one to admit defeat. But what could she possibly be planning? As I stepped out of Killian's den and into the cold morning air, I knew one thing for certain: she was getting desperate. And desperate people made mistakes. I just needed to find hers before she found mine. Back at the Everstone estate, Evelyne's chambers were locked, but locks had never stopped me before. With a quiet breath, I slipped inside, scanning the room. Unlike my own, which was neatly arranged, Evelyne's space was cluttered, letters strewn across her desk, open drawers, a half-packed trunk. She was planning something. And she was planning it soon. My eyes landed on a letter, its seal broken. From the Grand Duchess of Ashford. I recognized the name immediately. A powerful noblewoman known for her hatred of the Everstones. A chill ran through me. What was Evelyne doing, consorting with our family's enemy? That afternoon, in the royal court, I didn't wait for Evelyne to make her move. I went to the one place she was bound to show her hand, the palace. The court was bustling with nobles exchanging whispers, but my attention remained sharp. And then I saw her. Evelyne stood at the far end of the hall, speaking with Grand Duchess Ashford. My grip on my gloves tightened. What are you doing, Evelyne? I moved closer, careful to remain unseen. Serafina does not deserve the Everstone name, Evelyne was saying in a hushed voice. She has grown reckless. Reckless. I wanted to laugh. I had spent my life following the rules, only to be betrayed by the very people who claimed to love me. And now, because I refused to be a pawn in their game, I was reckless? The Grand Duchess smirked. And what do you propose? Evelyne hesitated, then spoke the words that sealed her fate. I want her disowned. My sister wanted me stripped of my title, my home, my place in society. She wanted me gone. But the Grand Duchess was not a fool. You expect me to move against the Everstones, she mused, tapping a gloved finger against her chin. What will I gain? Evelyne lifted her chin. I will be the next Duchess Everstone. And when I am, I will ensure my father's alliances favor you. A bargain. One that, if accepted, would destroy me. I had heard enough. Evelyne wanted to ruin me? Then she had better be prepared. Because I would not simply watch from the sidelines. That evening, at the Everstone estate, Evelyne barely had time to close her door before I stepped inside. She froze. Serafina. My voice was cold. I saw you today. A flicker of panic crossed her face, but she masked it quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Lying does not suit you, I said, stepping closer. You spoke with Grand Duchess Ashford. You plotted to have me disowned. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. I let the silence stretch. Let her feel it. Then I leaned in, lowering my voice to a whisper. Try it, Evelyne, I murmured. And I will burn everything you love to the ground. She flinched. Good. I turned, walking away, my heart steady. Evelyne had wanted to make the first move. But now, it was my game. And I would make sure she lost. I walked away from Evelyne's chambers, my steps measured, my heart steady. She thought she could plot against me in the shadows. She thought I wouldn't notice. She thought wrong. I had spent my last life being blind to her schemes, letting her weave her lies until I was left with nothing. This time, I was ready. And I would make sure Evelyne fell into her own trap. At dawn, I sent a letter to the one person who could ensure Evelyne's downfall. Grand Duchess Ashford. I knew Evelyne had promised her favors in exchange for my ruin, but the Grand Duchess was not the kind of woman who took risks without guarantees. I would give her a better deal. When my carriage arrived at the Ashford estate, The guards led me into a grand parlor where the Grand Duchess awaited, sipping tea as if she had been expecting me. "So," she murmured, setting down her cup, "the little Everstone's sister comes to negotiate. How interesting." I met her gaze evenly. "You are wasting your time with Evelyne." Her lips curved into a smirk. "Oh, Evelyne is reckless," I said smoothly. "She makes promises she can't keep. My father will never choose her over me." "But me." I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. "I am the rightful heir. And I can give you something Evelyne never will." The Grand Duchess arched her brow. "And what is that?" "A seat at the Everstone Council." The flicker of interest in her eyes told me I had her attention. "You have ambition, Lady Everstone," she said slowly. "But how do I know you won't betray me as your sister tried to betray you?" "Because unlike Evelyne," I said coolly, "I know how to keep my promises." She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Very well. Evelyne Everstone is no longer my concern." One enemy down. Now, I just needed to deal with Evelyne herself. By nightfall, the Everstone estate was alive with the sounds of an urgent summons. My father, Duke Everstone, stood in his study, frowning as Evelyne paced before him. "Father, you must listen to me," she pleaded. "Serafina is dangerous. She's been meeting with criminals, conspiring against our house." I stepped into the room before she could finish. "Is that so, Evelyne?" I asked, my voice deceptively soft. Her head snapped toward me, her face pale. "You." I smiled. "Father, perhaps you would like to hear about Evelyne's own alliances? The secret meetings, the letters to Grand Duchess Ashford." I paused, letting my next words sink in. Her attempts to have me disowned. Duke Everstone's face darkened. "Evelyne, is this true?" She sputtered. "No, she's lying. Serafina is manipulating you." I calmly reached into my sleeve and pulled out a letter. One of Evelyne's own signed with her seal. Her eyes widened in horror. "Where did you truly think I would not check your chambers?" I said smoothly. "You were never careful enough, Evelyne. And now." I turned to my father. "You have a choice, father. Keep a traitor in our house, or do what must be done." Duke Everstone's gaze was sharp as steel as he looked between us. Finally, he sighed. "Evelyne Everstone." She stiffened. "You are no longer my daughter." The halls were silent as the servants carried out their orders. Evelyne stood frozen as the guards escorted her away. Her face was pale, her expression one of disbelief. "You can't do this," she whispered. "You can't just erase me." I stepped forward, my voice quiet but firm. "That's where you're wrong, dear sister." I leaned in, whispering the final words that shattered her world. "You erased yourself." And with that, Evelyne Everstone was cast out. As I stood in the empty halls of my family's estate, a strange calm settled over me. Evelyne was gone. Her schemes had failed. I had won. But even as I breathed in my victory, I knew the war was far from over. Because somewhere in the shadows, the one who had sent the assassin was still waiting. Still watching. And they would strike again. Evelyne was gone. Her desperate schemes had crumbled beneath her own arrogance. And now, the halls of the Everstone estate were finally silent. But I knew better than to believe the danger had passed. The true enemy was still out there. And they were waiting for the right moment to strike. The storm had rolled in by nightfall, thunder rumbling through the skies as I sat in my chambers, staring at the flickering candlelight. Then came the knock. A single, measured tap. I rose cautiously, hand hovering over the dagger hidden beneath my sleeve. When I opened the door, I found Killian. His expression was unreadable, his dark cloak dripping from the rain. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, letting him in. "You don't usually sound so serious, Killian. Should I be concerned?" He gave a humorless chuckle. "Perhaps." Then, he pulled something from his coat. A letter. The seal was unmarked, the edges slightly burned as if someone had tried to destroy it. I frowned. "Where did you get this?" "It was meant for Evelyne," he said, handing it to me. "But she's no longer here to receive it." A chill ran down my spine as I unfolded the paper. The message was short, precise. "The first pawn has fallen. The game is far from over. Be ready." I clenched the parchment, my heartbeat steady even as my mind raced. Someone had been using Evelyne. And now, they have turned their attention to me. "Any idea who sent this?" I asked. Killian exhaled sharply. "No name, no crest. But I know one thing, whoever it is, they aren't just some noble looking for a petty rivalry." His gaze darkened. "This is bigger than the Everstones. Bigger than my family?" My fingers tightened around the letter. The pieces were starting to come together. The assassination attempt. Evelyne's reckless schemes. The well-timed betrayals. Someone had been orchestrating this from the beginning. And they weren't finished yet. Killian leaned closer. "Whoever they are, they want you and Evelyne at each other's throats. And now that she's gone." He let the words hang in the air. Now, I was the only one left standing. Which meant I was next. The next morning, an official summons arrived at the estate. The royal court had requested my presence. Not my father's. Mine. It was unprecedented, unusual, and exactly what I had been waiting for. They wanted me to step into their playing field. I would go. But I wouldn't go unprepared. The palace gleamed under the midday sun, but beneath the golden grandeur, I could feel the tension thrumming in the air. The nobles whispered as I passed. Some with admiration. Others with barely concealed contempt. And then I saw him. Seated at the head of the gathering was Crown Prince Alistair. His gaze met mine, sharp and unreadable. The room fell silent as he spoke. "Lady Seraphina Everstone." I curtsied, my expression composed. "Your Highness." He studied me for a moment before speaking again. "Your sister made many miscalculations." His voice was mild, but there was something cold lurking beneath it. "And yet, you remain standing. A test. A trap." I smiled, tilting my head slightly. "I suppose it is in my nature to survive, Your Highness." His lips curved slightly. "Indeed." Then, he leaned forward. "Tell me, Lady Everstone, are you ready to play the real game?" A hush fell over the room. The real game. A hush fell over the room. This wasn't just about family betrayals anymore. This was about power, influence, the throne. And suddenly, I understood. Evelyne had only been a pawn. But me. I was the queen they had underestimated. As I stepped out of the palace, the weight of what had just happened settled over me. Evelyne's fall had only been the first move. And now, I was caught in something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. But I wasn't afraid. Because this time, I wasn't playing to survive. I was playing to win. The storm had passed, yet the battlefield remained. Evelyne was gone, her schemes turned to dust. The Everstone name was restored, and for the first time in this lifetime, I stood alone at the top. But power was a game of strategy, and the final move had yet to be played. The night after my audience with the Crown Prince, I found myself in my father's study. Duke Everstone sat across from me, his fingers steepled. He had always been a man of few words, but tonight, the weight of our discussion was heavier than ever. "You understand what this means, don't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "The prince isn't simply watching me. He's testing me." My father exhaled. "And if you fail?" I met his gaze evenly. "I won't." There was no room for failure anymore. The mastermind who had used Evelyne was still lurking in the shadows, but now, their eyes were on me. They thought they could manipulate me as they had her. But what they didn't know was that I had already set my own trap. The message arrived at midnight. A single slip of parchment tucked beneath my door. Meet me in the old courtyard. Alone. The handwriting was familiar. Too familiar. I already knew who it was. Wrapping my cloak around me, I made my way through the moonlit corridors, silent as a shadow. When I reached the courtyard, he was waiting. Duke Lennox Ashford. Evelyne's greatest ally. The man who had orchestrated her rise. And her fall. You're bold, I said, stepping into the torchlight. Summoning me like this. He chuckled. You're the one who's bold, Seraphina. You've already eliminated one obstacle in your path. But do you truly believe you've won? I tilted my head. Haven't I? His smile didn't reach his eyes. I had high hopes for you, you know. But you've made a mistake. Have I? I mused, taking a slow step forward. Or are you realizing that you underestimated me? His jaw tightened. Tell me, Duke Ashford, I continued, my voice light. How does it feel to lose? His expression darkened. Careful, girl. But I only smiled. You're the one who should be careful. Because of your secrets. I leaned in. They belong to me now. His eyes flickered just for a second. But it was enough. The letters he had exchanged with Evelyne? The bribes? The quiet threats made in the shadows? I had them all. He had played his game well. But I had played it better. And now? It was a checkmate. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Duke Ashford had fallen from grace, his influence stripped. His allies abandoned him, and his family name crumbled beneath the weight of his corruption. And me. I stepped forward, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a victor. The court knew my name now. The crown prince watched me not as a mere noblewoman, but as an equal. The game was over. And I had won. As I stood in the Everstone Gardens, the breeze carrying whispers of a future yet to unfold, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Evelyne was gone. The shadows that had tried to control my fate had been silenced. And now, the world stretched before me, full of possibilities. I had fought for my place. And now, I would decide what came next. Not as a pawn. Not as a victim. But as the queen of my own destiny.